Welcome to this plenary session on Ascend Together Mental Health Symposium, Tackling Stigma and Supporting Employer Mental Health, presented by Ascend Impact Fund. My name is David Doan, and I am a management consultant senior manager at Accenture, aligned to our North America health practice. I also have the privilege of being the co-president of Ascend Los Angeles Metro chapter. What I just shared is my work face mask that I have on. Behind this face mask is a 52-year-old Vietnamese refugee who fled by boat back in 1978 with my mom and younger brother. With only 5 minutes, it is impossible for me to share the numerous stories, many of them extremely traumatic and painful, that make up the person that you don't see when I have my face mask on, especially in the workplace. There are many reasons why you might also choose to have your face mask on at work. Consistent with the recent Ascend API mental health survey with over 600 of you who responded, 49% of the respondents have experienced shame and negative remarks. Research studies tend to show Asian Americans are among the least likely to seek mental health care. For example, in one study, less than 9% sought any type of mental health services over 1 year, compared with 18% of the general US population. For all Ascend study, 56% of respondents said that they have previously or are currently seeking professional mental health support, and 21% said that they have not sought any mental health services but could use them. These statistics are highly encouraging for our Pan-Asian community. Nevertheless, there are real barriers to talk about mental health. Feeling uncomfortable or selfish, focusing on one's own needs, thinking that one's needs are not worthy of time and money investment, the lack of API mental health professionals, and the cultural tendency to save face or keep up with appearances. With lots of self-work, courage, and support, I have ascended over the years and have made the decision to take off my mask so I could help myself and others at work and outside of work. Hi, I'm David Doan again. I have previously been challenged with being stoic, apathetic, numb from experiencing generational traumas and not being able to find the right words to describe how I have struggled with my mental health issues. Through my life journey, I have witnessed many injustices and pains. I was born as the result of a rape, and my mom had to make the difficult decision to put me in a foster home. Couldn't bear to leave me there. She took me back and was disowned by her own parents, along with 12 of her siblings who fled the country prior to the fall of Saigon in 1975. My mom, brother, and I were left behind, and my mom struggled trying to survive on our own without anything. This resulted in 3 attempted suicides. No child should witness this of their parent. I fled my country by boat with my mom and younger brother at the age of 7 years old. Our boat was sunk by 3 Thai pirate ships. Half of the people on that boat did not survive. It was a miracle for my mom, brother, and me to be able to catch the ropes to be brought onto one of those 3 Thai ships. The horror did not end there. I saw in my own eyes how the men were tortured, the women were violated and raped, and that we were all forced to jump out of the Thai ship in the middle of the night, close to Malaysia, as they could not get close to shore. Next, another miracle. A father and son happened to be fishing in the middle of the night and heard us screaming and alerted the authorities so they could bring us on shore to Pulau Bidong, Malaysia. We endured hardship for 1.5 years at the refugees camp with very little food and clothing. Lucky to be immigrated to the US on January 15, 1980, I realized I never felt belong when we were reunited with my maternal grandparents. There were too many horrible stories to share of how I was mistreated, but I share one for now. I was molested by two of my uncles, psychologically abused for being reminded that I don't belong in the family by my grandfather, and bullied at school by other kids for being different in so many ways. I rebelled, became stoic, and somehow lost my self-confidence and my voice to speak up. I took care of my younger brother and helped to raise him for 12 years while my mom, as a single parent, worked numerous jobs 7 days a week to raise us. My brother later resented me for not being a brother, but rather a father figure. I don't blame him at all. I witnessed how men mistreated women, my own mother, as she seemed to date a handful of men who were controlling, abusive, and violent. I then struggled with my sexuality in college and was confused and conflicted by the confluence of traumas and identity and family and culture and religion. I lived with wearing multiple face masks on until I sought treatment for being a victim of sexual abuse. Professionally, I have experienced and witnessed injustices in the workplace among the Pan-Asian community. For example, I was working in the hospital as a registered nurse. I was compelled to speak up. I observed how male physicians mistreated Filipino female nurses. I hit many more low points in my adulthood, being with partners that have mistreated me as they too suffer from numerous mental health issues of their own. Perhaps the lowest point in my life was when I lost my brother to cancer on July 31st, 2017, which is 12 days from that date. July certainly is not a good month for us. Now I do my best to comfort my mom for the unspeakable and grave loss that she experienced while finding a way to heal my own heart from the same loss that we both endure. There are many other stories, but I pause here. Feeling vulnerable now, I share these stories in front of you in the hope that you too can take off your own face mask. I have ascended and would like to invite you to be vulnerable and human to ascend with me. If you have already ascended, then find someone to help and support them to ascend from their own stories and experiences. This is your opportunity to address the stigma of mental health head-on and face masks off. To continue with this important dialogue, I would like to introduce Ginger Soul, Managing Director, Strategy Head of Client Sustainable Solutions at US Bank, to moderate this Ascend Together Mental Health Symposium panel discussion. Let's welcome Ginger with a warm embrace.
I met David yesterday, and he had shared with us in writing some of his remarks. And so when I first met him in person, all I could do was hug him and thank him for his courage and his resilience. And I hope you take away that, the first step in dealing with stress and mental health is recognizing it and being able to talk about it. So really, applause to David. So I was personally grateful when I was asked to moderate this panel because it is important to me and to my employer, which is US Bank. So we have core values at US Bank, and the most important to me is that we put people first. US Bank is an inaugural corporate sponsor of the Ascend Impact Fund, which sponsors this part of the symposium. And it was launched in 2021, which many of you remember were some pretty dark times, coming during COVID. The fund, part of the Ascend Foundation, focuses on raising awareness of the history and prevalence of anti-Asian racism through expanding advocacy, allyship, education, thought leadership, and community engagement to create sustainable change. The Impact Fund work increases Ascend's ability to raise awareness, challenge the model minority myth, and anti-Asian sentiment, and to allow employees and allies to work together for sustainable change. I think there's going to be a US Bank slide which will go up and down. Ascend's work is meaningful to me because of what we each face: anti-Asian hate, imposter syndrome, feeling invisible, adapting to a professional environment, navigating complex family dynamics, work-life balance, and all the while we're trying to be our authentic self and grow our careers and support our family members. And many of you, I think Asian families, we all grow up knowing that we're also going to be supporting our family members financially, which is another stress. So how many times has your manager told you to be more aggressive? And to be more like the majority culture? And then when you did, you were accused of being like too aggressive. How many times as a student were you scolded if you got an A instead of the A+? Or on the alternative, maybe you weren't an A student and a B student is perfectly respectable, but maybe not in your family. So as a child, I was taught that whatever I did reflected on my family. I think many of you share that same background. And if I misbehaved as a young child, my mother or father would say to me, "We brought the wrong baby home from the hospital." Does any of this resonate with you? So, I've been asked to speak about my career journey. So I started the typical path of a banker and worked in commercial banking, private banking, led teams. And along the way, I got married and had my first son, which I was applauded for because he was born in the year of the dragon. But my husband's job took him for long periods of travel. And I worked long hours. And we would have the nanny give my son 2 naps a day so that he could have dinner with us at 10 p.m. at night. And that wasn't sustainable. So I made the difficult decision to walk away and focus on what was most important to me, which is family. And so those were wonderful years raising, I had another child, and so I had 2 children. Those were wonderful years, but they were also sort of like an intellectual desert for a while. So I started volunteering, both locally and at the national level. And that helped me sort of realize my own personal identity. And it was really helpful because otherwise I would have focused too much on the kids and become this super tiger mom and driven my kids even more crazy. So after 11 years at home, I rejoined the workforce and started all over again. So it was 11 years. We needed the money. And it was stressful to start over again. And I worked extra hard for fear that people would think I was a work-at-home mom. But this time around, I could be smarter and work smarter. And I learned credit and operational risk and corporate banking and capital markets. And I used my volunteer skills to start a women's business resource group in the New York office. And my life experience and training helped me lean into diversity, equity, and inclusion work, which brings me to my current strategy role, which is in sustainability and strategy. And that came out of a passion for the social in environmental, social, and governance. But how did I get that role? I envisioned the role, saw a gap, envisioned how it could be met, wrote a job description, pitched it to senior leaders, and was able to develop a whole strategy and team around it. But that came through all of the career learnings, networking, and a supportive team. Thankfully, along the way, I've learned how to identify and manage stress and lead with gratitude. I hope you take away from this panel an understanding of our unique stresses and ways we can address our mental health issues openly. This Mental Health Symposium is a testament to Ascend's ongoing commitment to creating safe places for our members where they can share, reflect, and discuss difficult topics such as mental health. And just by being here, you're taking all the steps. Ascend member surveys and insights continue to affirm talking about mental health or seeking mental health has traditionally been considered a sign of weakness. Discussing mental health is considered taboo in many Asian cultures. We don't have the language to talk about it. Being vocal about mental health goes against our stoicism. And when it comes to mental health, we feel isolated, and we don't know where to turn to for help. And uniquely, family expectations and parental pressures to succeed in academics is also a source of stress. In response, the Ascend Foundation has risen to the challenge by funding programs like this symposium and other global virtual forums, coupled with thought leadership research and mental health surveys that aim to better understand the ongoing mental health challenges for the Pan-Asian workforce and helping us have solutions to address these challenges. Through these efforts, the Ascend Foundation strives to destigmatize mental health and build a sense of belonging for all. So I encourage you to look at the Ascend research, which is online. But now it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists, and they're gonna come out, and we're gonna do it fairly quickly to make up some time. Johnny Chang is the Managing Director for Accenture's US West Market Unit. Thanks. Manju Kulkarni is the Executive Director of AAPI Equity Alliance, and she co-founded Stop Asian Hate in March 22. And Sheila Enriquez is the Texas market leader for Crow, a public accounting, consulting, and technology firm. So thank you all. And I guess really to break the ice, each of you, if you could describe in one sentence how you would describe what you do for your family members.
So I'll start. Thank you, Ginger. So that's a great question, a really short story on this. But I remember years ago when I was traveling overseas and coming back abroad, there's an immigration card and there's a field that says occupation. So me working at Accenture, I put consultant. And when I handed the form in to the immigration officer, he looks at the form, looks me in the eye and say, "This is what people write when they're in between jobs. What do you really do?" So since then on, I tell people I work in technology, and I think that's basically what I say now.
Well, first off, I want to thank Ascend and Robina Singh for the invitation to be with you all today. It's really an honor to be part of this panel alongside Ginger, Johnny, and Sheila. So in 2020, AAPI Equity Alliance, along with Chinese for Affirmative Action and San Francisco State University, co-founded Stop AAPI Hate when we began to see the emergence of COVID-19 related hate against our communities. It continues to be a national civil rights organization that's been leading the fight against anti-Asian hate through data and research, policy and advocacy, and narrative change. And so we do that work, and I'll be sharing some of the data with you today. And my side hustle is teaching at UCLA in Asian American Studies, and so I bring some of that knowledge and expertise with me as well. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. You know, I thought about this. One sentence is really hard to describe what I do. I'm the Texas market leader for Crow and very much honored to be here today. But, you know, in kind of thinking about how I would explain it to my family, I go back to our firm's purpose. So I have the privilege of serving my clients, my team members, my community to shape their better tomorrow together today. That's how I'm going to put it.
Well said. So we're going to have a polling question. And let's see, is the polling question coming up? So as the polling question is coming up, we're going to ask a question of Johnny and Sheila. So the theme of I Ascend explores the unique and omnipresent advancement barriers for Pan-Asians across industries and across career levels. How do we break through these barriers to reach our full potential?
So I guess I'll go first, Ginger. You know, when I reflect on the aspects of mental health, and you know, as you could probably see on the survey right now, I do think it absolutely has a direct correlation to your success and ascension in the corporate professional setting. Mental health, just like physical health, is really the foundation of your being, right? And without strong roots in the foundation, you cannot achieve greatness. But the good news is, like, you know, exercising or muscle stimulation, it's a skill that you can build by talking about it and by engaging others because it's something that you can master with enough practice, right? The act of self-love, building the confidence to advocate for yourself, to advocate for others, really is rooted in your mental stability and fortitude. So I think it is, you know, I don't like to say there's wrong answers, but I think the answer should clearly be yes. So.
And we see a very strong 95% yes. Sheila, your thoughts
I am
on
not
this?
surprised. If you had asked me before the results would have shown up, I would have told you wholeheartedly that obviously, you know, our mental health struggles impact our ability not just to be present, but to actually perform and ascend in our organizations. How can you be the best version of yourself if you're struggling with mental health issues? And for me personally, in terms of my journey, I actually came to the United States as a college student on a student visa. And for some of you that were on a similar journey, you know how difficult it is to find that first job. You know, that employer that's going to give you the opportunity to prove yourself so that they will then sponsor you for your green card. And the result of that for me is I felt like I had to keep proving myself. And I had to keep working hard for every opportunity that came my way. And I'm not going to change it for anything because it's what got me here today. But I can tell you that throughout my career, and it's been close to 30 years, there have been periods of burnout. You know, being Asian, being that stereotypical nice and doesn't say no and will put your head down and not be assertive. I've definitely become a better version of myself through the help of people around me, but it took me asking for help and it took me recognizing that these are things that I had to overcome from a cultural perspective because you don't talk about your stresses, right? I mean, you carry it, you keep it to yourself, but that has a huge weight. And so really one way for us to think about this is we start with ourselves and make sure that you have your self-care taken care of on a daily basis and that you're protecting your relationships and the support around you that will keep shoring you up because there's inevitably periods of time, you know, in our work where we're going to need that support.
So we really wanted to turn to talk about Stop Asian Hate. And you know, not even all of my colleagues know, although I've been open about it, but in December of last year, in the middle of the day in New York City at a December fair, I was physically assaulted. I was pushed to the ground. It was clearly an anti-Asian hate incident, and it was both stunning and not stunning. Stunning in the sense that I couldn't believe it was happening in broad daylight in a crowded area. And at the same time, I thought, like, it does happen. It does happen. So we wanted to talk about how COVID and a lot of the anti-Asian hate violence disproportionately impacts our community. And we're really pleased that Manju has really done the work as a co-founder of Stop Asian Hate. And she's been recognized by both Time and Bloomberg. So Manju, if you would talk about this, I think it would be very instructional for all of us.
Sure, thank you, Ginger, for that question. And so as I mentioned, beginning in 2020, we began our reporting center and have since that time received over 11,000 incident reports from all 50 states. They include the stories of verbal harassment, physical assault like the one, unfortunately, Ginger, you experienced, and civil rights violations, including discrimination in the workplace, including discrimination in retail and in housing. And we know that hate impacts all of our communities, East Asian, South Asian, and Southeast Asian, alongside Pacific Islanders. And more than 1 in 4, more than 25% take place in businesses. So that is, again, the discrimination that we see in the workplace, unfortunately, and also in public accommodations. And these are not simply interpersonal attacks, but also institutional. And so what we see in terms of mental health impacts is that hate really and racism are chronic stressors. They've resulted in PTSD, in racial trauma, and there have even been physical impacts as a result. So increased hypertension, maternal mortality rates, and what's called weathering, which is early health deterioration. And this is across communities of color. And what this slide shows is that hate also has negative impacts on Asian Americans in the workplace. I happen to sit on the AAPI Advisory Committee for COCWL, which is a global think tank and nonprofit advisory group. And their national survey that was released last May found that among AAPI professionals, 63% said that hate had a negative impact on their mental health. 45% of professionals said it had a negative impact on their physical health. 40% said it even affected their relationships with their managers and supervisors. And 62% said that it affected their feelings of commuting safely to the workplace. And sadly, despite all of this, members of our community feel invisible. And so I believe we have now a video that was done by a group of artists and actors that show some of that invisibility that our community members experience. If we could tee that up.
I mean, I have a visceral reaction to the video, and I've seen it probably a dozen times by now. It really hits me hard, and I vividly recall a conversation that I had with my then 19-year-old son. He's 20 now. He actually goes to the University of Texas, Austin. And I didn't know what to tell him when he shared with me that he had real concerns about going out, about being targeted, as an Asian male. And I've lived in this country for over 30 years, and that was really the first time I felt unsafe. And I didn't have the answers, candidly. So I really just want to thank you, Manju, for starting, and I know you're one of the co-founders of Stop AAPI Hate, and truly you have given us the courage to speak up, because I think in many ways that minority model minority myth becomes true because we end up living it in our everyday life and not speaking up. But these are the things that really we need to have, because those incidents would not have come to the public's perception and awareness, but for the work that you're doing. So thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you. Manju is actually leaving tonight as she's attending a White House-led forum on AAPI hate. So thank you again for really magnifying our voice. So we have another polling question. And this one we're going to be, we're going to be talking about the research and Ascend surveys show that Asians do not seek out mental health support for a number of reasons, including due to the stigma attached to it. As the speakers reflect on this, we're doing this polling. We're kind of interested in how you respond. And maybe Johnny and Sheila, Johnny, if you would like to talk to this.
Sure. When it comes to mental health, and I'm just gonna level with you guys all right, I'm a very authentic person. I just really try to be my authentic self, but mental health impacts every single human being, right? It doesn't matter where you are in life, early in your career as a child, late in your career. The truth is it impacts all of us. And actually, as you rise up in your careers, it probably gets even harder over time, right? The pressures become greater. There's a saying, one of my mentors told me before, the higher you rise, the thinner the air gets. So there's actually less people you can talk to about mounting pressures. So you have to understand that it impacts like all of us. Like we're all human. We don't have all the answers. But echoing what I was saying earlier is that fortunately for us, it is a skill that you can build, right? I think mental health, physical health, everything kind of constantly goes through entropy. So it's going to deteriorate if you don't exercise that muscle. So you have to practice, loving others, loving yourself, and really talking is the nourishment for your souls, right? And again, I sort of go back to this is, in order for you to achieve greatness, you have to have the right foundations. And without the foundations, there's no amount of faking you can do, but yourself, but also you owe it to others to, to create the space for them to be their authentic selves too. So one of the things I ask all my leaders is model vulnerability, right? Just be who you are, it's okay. You heard David's story earlier, and Ginger as well has been a victim. But as I was catching up with David over this conference, I think it's also important. I wanted to share the conversation in that, he's gone through so much, he's shown so much vulnerability, sharing his stories today, but that doesn't define who he is, right? In the conversations we're talking about, he's really just starting his journey. He still has aspirations to ascend, he wants to raise, and so he doesn't let the past dictate who he is. But being his authentic self, sharing his story, helps me and others understand his context. But it's not holding him back, right? It's a strength, and courage, and I think those are the things you have to sort of let go in order for you to succeed.
Sheila?
Yeah, I mean, really well put, and there's not much to add other than I want to reiterate, this is a universal issue. This is not just an AAPI issue, but it is unique to us in many ways because of our reluctance to say there is something wrong. And I think that's where it starts. Recognize that there is a problem, recognize that it doesn't define you, and recognize that you have people around you that can support you, but you have to ask for that help. There is no shame in asking for that help. This actually hits near and dear to me too, because during the pandemic, these mental health challenges have really been exacerbated, and I've seen it even with our younger kids. And it's really, suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, and certainly as we rise up, it even gets harder because then burnout comes into play. So really, I just encourage you, if you're in that space where you really need to talk about it, and for leaders in the room, please be vulnerable, share your story, because that's the only way that you can create a safe space for your people, for your staff, to be able to also have the courage to share their story.
Thank you. And it doesn't surprise me that all of the above, but certainly the perception of feeling that you might be considered weak, right, followed by other issues that aren't captured here, or that you can't discuss it. Like all of these things, I think the audience has identified the Ascend research that is being done. These are ways that give us a path forward. So we're going to be turning to the last question, which is about the implications of this. But I just want to tee you up that we're allowing time for Q&A, and all of us are really interested in hearing your feedback on. So just know that there's going to be a Q&A period, and please think about questions for us. So what are the implications of mental health concerns going unchecked? And what can businesses and leaders do to improve our employee mental health? What can we do to support our well-being? And as the panelists are thinking about that, for reference, during COVID, Ascend hosted a series of forums with ERG or BRG leaders and members on this, and related topics that explored how BRGs or ERGs are supporting employees. Ascend Together Forum, Resilient ERGs Combating Asian Hate Crimes. So, and along with this, we're also going to talk about a call to action of what we can all do together. So with that, maybe Sheila, if you would start first.
Oh, sure.
And
yeah, so for me, it starts at the top in the workplace. So I think we have to set an example as leaders and make sure that not only do we have official programs, which I know when I look around the room, I think we have 2,000 attendees in this conference. Your employers are committed to you because you're here. If they're not, you're not going to be here. This is part of your development and part of how you really rise in your companies. So I think it really starts at the top. At Crow, we're very privileged, and I'm very proud that we do have official programs. In fact, we have established May as a Mental Health Awareness Month. We brought in a couple of speakers that spoke about mental health, and not only about educating us on really what to look out for, but also giving us the tools to become an empathetic employer. Our CEO, Mark Baer, is also involved with an organization on suicide prevention, and we have committed to actually support Suicide Prevention Month in September, also doing a walk on behalf of the organization in November. And we actually had a disconnect week, July 4th. I actually just came back from the Philippines to be with my family for my father's second-year death anniversary, and I could not have done that had we not been closed all of 4th of July. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the interpersonal one-on-one conversations and providing avenues for your employees to actually raise their voices and raise their concerns. And that means coaching, mentoring, and sponsorship. It seems to keep coming back to that, and we have that in spades as well. So I think I really just encourage you to take advantage of what your employers are providing you, the resources and the people that can help you.
Johnny, your thoughts?
Sure. So, look, we all work for great companies. You wouldn't be here unless, your company was awesome. So, at Accenture as well, we have numerous programs around ERG. We invest significantly on it. But the truth is, like, there's no amount of programming that can replace genuine connection, right? Like, you have to, that one-on-one conversation, the conversation around how are you doing beyond a superficial, okay, I'm good, everything's good. I think those are the things that actually drive a lot of impact because, we, as humans, we're social creatures, right? We like to talk, we like to engage, we like to get others. And so, yes, there are lots of programs, but I think it's, when I think about the call to action, for you as an individual, my call to action for you is take care of yourself first. And then, if you're in the, privileged position of being in leadership, I think it's to, model vulnerability, right? Like you have to share a little bit of yourself in order to get reciprocal response back. But those are the things that will not just help you professionally, but it'll help you emotionally. And, that's how you can be your whole self.
And I want to piggyback on both Sheila and Johnny's comments, which are so important. I think even though, the companies in this room are fabulous, it is true still at the same time that often from coworkers and supervisors, we experience microaggressions. And that is, a small part of the equation when it comes to hate. How many of us have gotten questions like, where are you from? Where are you really from? Right? To indicate that we're not American. How many times, I know when I was growing up, I was very often told, your English is so good, to which I wanted to answer, actually, it's much better than yours. But I didn't do that for my own safety and well-being. But what's interesting that we found from the research is that racism can be a stressor even if you don't label it as that. Even if you don't label it as being hate. Some of you may be familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And our bodies do keep the score, right? And so the implications, Ginger, as you've asked, are in terms of mental and physical health. And so for us at Stop AAPI Hate, it's about collective solutions to address the systemic harm from both institutional as well as interpersonal racism. In addition to the sponsorship and mentorship and the vulnerability pieces, I think it's really important to have policies and practices that prevent these type of microaggressions, the discrimination, right? Not getting promoted simply because of your race or not even being hired in the first place. Also supporting employee mental health, whether it's days off or sometimes having, through BRG groups, support conversations. And lastly, building cross-racial solidarity. Because we're not in this together. If we were, we are in this together. If we weren't, right, we would know that we're just doing this individually and we're not gonna win. But with other communities of color, we can bring about the solutions that we all need in our workplaces.
Well said. And and I just would add to that there are things that you can do individually if you're not a manager. For example, at US Bank, the Asian BRG started Meditation Mondays, right? And that was really at the suggestion of employees who said, I use meditation to deal with the stress. And so the Asian BRG sponsors that at lunchtime on Mondays. And of course it's open to all. And their employees also advocated for a series called Thrive Thursdays, where individuals get together. Maybe you're dealing with the unfortunate, terrible loss of a spouse or a family member, and you want to be able to talk to others going through the same thing. So these things can be driven by employees, even if you're not a leader, to advocate for things that will help you. So we want to make sure that you come away from this panel realizing that you can talk openly about mental health. It's real. It takes both a mental and a physical impact, as Manju said, and that together we can make progress on it. And I think at this point we should open it to questions. So I'm hoping there's some questions out there.
Sorry, okay, this is on. Hi, thank you for sharing all of your thoughts and wisdom so far. My name is Lisa Huang North. I'm currently a senior product leader at Microsoft and also the global co-chair for our Asian ERG. So I think one element which I love today is having this safe space to talk about mental health, because it really starts with us, right? I think to acknowledge, have self-awareness, and be able to do something about it, seeking professional help or talking to others. But also, I think in this increasing day and age where there is market forces, there is limited funding, there is layoff, we're also seeing DEI budget been taken away and reduced. So given we have so many leaders in this room, folks across different career stages, and folks who have developed influence and power, I'd love to hear your advice as well as maybe how you have put into practice in advocating for AAPIs in the workplace to really implement that systemic change at the process level. Because more often than not, we hear that, hey, there's a lot of Asian monolith representation, right? And are you really a minority? And do you really have racial and equity justice? I don't know. I don't know how many workplaces devote as much to it. So I would love to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
I can start. So I think in many ways, I understand sort of the limitations that employers face, but at the end of the day, a lot of the things that we can do don't really have that much of a cost. It's time, right? It's that being able to have an open door if you're a leader and be able to actually spend that time and be present. And also, for me personally, what I've had to exercise over the course of my leadership journey is non-judgment. And what I find is that if you exercise non-judgment, people come to you because you give them grace and you listen, but also use your influence to then make a difference. And I really like what you said, Manju, about policies and making sure that we're not just listening, but not addressing the problem. And so as leaders, that is our obligation, that is our responsibility, and have to keep going back to them to say, is it better? What else can we do, right? Asking for that feedback, because once they share that information with you, they expect you to do something with it, unless they really just tell you they're just there to talk. So, I feel like the budget, yes, there are constraints, but those are more the formal programs. What you can't replace is the one-on-one conversation, and words matter. You may not know what impact your words have with the people you work with, but they do, and I think that's what's so gratifying. Once you get to a certain level where you do know you can have influence.
That's right. So I can sort of go next, but it doesn't cost anything to care about others, right? Like, there are budgets, yes, and there are formal programming, but at the end of the day, like, the company, like all companies, Accenture, I'm sure other companies as well, they need the feedback, right? So if you want to drive change, you have to do something, right? So like for me, my call to action when I got more involved with our APA ERG was because I felt like I needed to do something. And my participation at first was not in a leadership capacity. I simply went on a call as a participant to a listening session, during the Asian hate. But I think it's, this is why I think the work of SEND and Stop AAPI Hate is really impactful, because I think it echoes and gives us the data to go demand something, right? And you have to demand it in order for change to happen systemically. So, take it on yourself. I think, you have the obligation to drive change, and you have the ability to drive change if you just, believe in yourself and do it.
Thank you.
Do you want
Next, down.
Hi, my name is Quinn Zhang at the Boeing Company. Thank you for the AAPI Stop the Asian Hate. I'm a UCLA alumni, but I never took in your classes. So the job of the AAPI Stop the Hate is not done yet. I'm from Oakland. Right now, my grandpa, who's 95 years old, he is still afraid to go out because if you've seen the videos on TV, the news, they were recorded by the street cameras on Chinatown, and then all these elderly people got pushed down on the floor. I could imagine that's my grandfather, and I am very frightened. That's the purpose that I'm joining Ascend. So right now, the spotlight or the news is not covering any of these, but it's still happening in Chinatown, in Oakland. So my question is, the root cause for most of the problem is mental health of the homeless people. How can we have more funding to take care of those? Because if we don't take care of those root cause, the situation is going to keep on happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And you are absolutely right that the work is not done, and it continues to happen even as the spotlight has disappeared from this issue. And in fact, we are going to be issuing our third annual report in the coming weeks, and we see that we continue to get the same, essentially same number and percentage of reports from across the community. And seniors have been impacted in a very, very serious way. So I would say that, part of what we've been looking at policy-wise is root causes, right? How do we get to the root causes? You've mentioned one of those, which is, unfortunately, sometimes some of the perpetrators are homeless. They do have substance abuse or mental health issues. Certainly, we need more resources. In California, we actually got the passage of 2 laws last year, one to promote safety in public transit, because a lot of times what we need is more light, more individuals that are not just police officers, but workers, employees in our transit, in our bus stops, so that people feel safe and so that they know that they won't be attacked. And then finally, also, we need those procedures when people are discriminated in retail spaces. And we've seen many, many times a huge number of our cases involve people just going to get a prescription and another customer or an employee makes comments. So getting to the root causes is key. And so I think part of what we all can do and should do is to advocate for policies that help our communities. And by the way, against policies like the one that passed in Florida and was signed, which is to prevent Chinese immigrants from buying property. This is now taking over the country. There was a bill here in Texas, and we see many across the country. One in Louisiana would actually prevent Chinese immigrants from even renting property. So this should scare us, because today it might be China, tomorrow it could be Japan, the next day it could be India, and so on and so forth. And this is what we had in the 1920s, and sadly in the 2020s, we are back to discrimination being allowed against our communities.
Thank you.
Can we get at that side, maybe? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you so much for this panel. I really appreciate it. My name's Parag Matawar. I'm the Director of Professional Programs at SACE, the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. I'm taking copious notes. When I think about Asian hate, I'm brought back to 9/11, right? And I know for easily a year I was randomly selected, nonstop. Didn't matter which airport and where. The TSA or whatever they were called back then would stop as soon as they saw me, right? I don't, and maybe I'm jaded, I don't recall as much of a public outcry or a community coming together at that time. And of course, contexts were different with the war and with the, with the buildings coming down and everything. What gives you confidence that this time will be different? What are you seeing? Of course, we've got a lot more information with the internet and whatnot, but what gives you confidence? What should give us confidence that this time will be different?
I can start. Well, what gives me confidence is the fact that I have seen communities come out in support. I will tell you, after the Atlanta shooting, in Los Angeles, there was a rally in Koreatown, and I saw folks from 0 to age 99 who were out in full force. Ammas and appas, nanis, ajumas, who were out there. A lot of folks who didn't speak English, who are in walkers and wheelchairs, but they were there to say, you know what, we are America. This is also our country. And I think, 11,000, which is what has been reported to us, is actually a small number. The Pew Research Center found that it was 45% of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who've experienced hate since 2020. That equates to 8 to 10 million individuals. So I think just the sheer numbers of folks that have experienced it also means that many of us can stand up, will stand up, and will say that this is unacceptable and that we are part of this country and we expect the same rights and privileges as every other American.
And what gives me hope is the work of the Ascend Impact Fund.
Exactly.
And the companies that have been inaugural contributors and additional contributors to this fund. Because I think in many cases, data matters.
Absolutely.
But data and the personal story. So, and when I say not all my colleagues know, that doesn't mean that I haven't been open. The next day that I was at work, I told everyone. And a lot of the managers said to me, thank you for sharing that, because I knew it happened, but I didn't think it would ever happen to someone I knew, right? And the fact that it happened to me, really kind of brought home. And then one of the managers actually called me and he said, I heard, about this. Thank you for sharing that, because now I understand why this Asian American woman that works for him is so worried about the commute. And now I will be more open to listening. So again, it's the data, but also our willingness to talk about mental health and about Asian hate. To the next question.
Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Gadastik. Normally I don't get nervous, but man, I am shaking today. It's a lot of energy in the room. And me and Ginger ran into each other in the bathroom yesterday. It was a lovely exchange we had and turned into a passionate conversation regarding mental health. And I asked her to see if I can use this opportunity today to share my story. And she gladly encouraged me. So I would like to share my own story of when my mental health wake-up call was. So about 3 years ago, I was working at a unicorn startup. For you guys, a lot of them are from the top four, the big four. You know what unicorn means. It's 10-fold growth year over year. I was leading the marketing effort by myself, alone. And the task was to bring the company from valuation 100 million to 1 billion. And I was in the mental state to, it's been repeated many times in the past 2 days, to prove myself, to impress, so I can be perceived as successful, as that I have leadership. And hoping that after that, I will be able to receive the promotion that I deserve, the position I deserve, and a recognition that I deserve. So I did it. In 6 months, the company was valued at $1 billion. And I also had the opportunity to sit down with Forbes, Bloomberg, Washington Post, working with VCs like SoftBank. But I was lost. I did not get a promotion, I did not get the money, I did not get a recognition. Nothing happened after that. I was in this dark period of my time. One day I was driving from work to home. In a split second, I wanted to drive myself off of the highway. And that scared me. So I brought myself to a full stop, brought my car to a full stop. But most importantly, I brought myself to a full stop. The next morning, I still went back to work, but I have changed. Instead of following what I think I should be, who I think I should be, what does society want me to be, who I should be, I decided to ask myself, how am I feeling? What do I want to do? What makes me feel good? I decided to prioritize happiness. I took a different job about a year ago, and I told myself I wanted to do the things that sparks joy for me, because I believe it costs $0 to be happy. We're talking about funds, everything to initiate another movement, but we all should ask ourselves, what did I do? Is there anything I can do to help this movement? We have to start from ourselves. We have to start from me. Because it's only until when you heal yourself, then you have the opportunity and the capacity to help others. Fast forward, I'm currently working at Mercedes-Benz. My folks. This is my first time to this I Ascend convention. My background, I actually grew up in China. I moved here when I was 31, so I didn't grow up facing racism at all. When I was confronted by it, most of the time I don't recognize it. However, it inspired me to think about something that, is there anything different? Is there a different approach when we come to combat racism? Is there anything that everybody here today can come home, can take it from home and start practice tomorrow? Is there anything that we can do to help move us just a little bit forward? I'm asking myself, what is the mindset we need to engage in order to stand up for ourselves? You know what? You can discriminate against me based on my look, based on how I speak, but you cannot discriminate against my energy. I invite everyone to look inside, find your truth, take care of yourself, and raise your vibration and create an aura around you. And by doing that, by everybody take the initiative, day by day, I believe, next year when we gather, we will have a different story. Let's stop playing into the narrative of what they think we should be. Let's stand up to be who we are. I carry this necklace every day, and this is what brought us to the discussion, caught Ginger's eye with this necklace. This is something that every time people ask me, I will take the opportunity to talk about my culture, to talk about China. I know it's very difficult, but if we all come from a very compassionate and loving place, not trying to debate and prove them wrong, but bring the most beautiful thing that we hold within ourselves forward, I believe tomorrow will be a better day. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Mic drop.
That was amazing.
Sorry for the interruption. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to close this out. Stay. Yep. Now that you have heard not only the panelists, and thank you so much for your insight and vulnerability, and others who have shared the story, what are your key takeaways? I share some of my key takeaways. Talking about mental health and seeking professional help are not easy, but it's important to do so for our general and holistic health that you mentioned. When we decide to take off our face mask, even at work, we remove the physical and emotional barriers that allow us to be our authentic, imperfect self. Talking about mental health is not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of courage and strength. To be an empathetic and inclusive leader, one must abandon stoicism and celebrate realism, resiliency, humanity, and emotions, however imbalanced, labile, and imperfect. Talking about mental health in seeking culturally competent and sensitive mental health services are ways to proactively and directly address the stigma that persists in the Pan-Asian community. Let's ascend together and amplify our collective voices using the strengths of your inner selves and support our Pan-Asian community to be kind and gentle to ourselves and celebrate our imperfect, humane selves and remind us that it is okay to ask for mental health help. Please join me by saying, I ascend, to close this plenary session. Say it with me, I ascend.
I ascend.
I ascend.
I ascend.
We ascend.
We ascend.
Thank you. You have ascended. We have ascended together. Thank you.